not quite follow or understand.
Not a Pax Americana.
In today's society, when information is everywhere and waiting to be disseminated to the general public, the role of the media has become even more important. Information is a weapon, a source of power, and a tool to keep people informed, because it controls how people see things and how they respond to what's going on around them. India is a major player in the modern world. It is a rising economic powerhouse and a nuclear-armed country. It has become an important regional power. As a result, the nation is one of the major targets of the Western liberal media, whose bias and lack of knowledge have led to a flood of bad news about the world's largest democracy. Western media sources often get India wrong, whether it via offensive cartoons published in the Australian and the New York Times, or by over-the-top criticism of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Historically, Western media has positioned itself as the antidote to news formerly transmitted in the Soviet bloc, China, or the Third World. This reporting was dubbed state-controlled and propaganda, making it obviously bogus. In response, the Western media positioned itself as independent, objective, fair, and truthful. This Western media is in a state of self-protective shock right now. It thinks that manipulative false information is a threat to it. The Cambridge Analytica scandal showed us this best. In the 2010, personal information belonging to millions of Facebook users was acquired without their agreement by the British consulting firm Cambridge Analytica. This information was primarily intended to be used for advertising purposes related to political campaigns. It feels threatened by the loss of its business and influence to social media, which explains its never-ending attempt to portray Google and Facebook as widely recognized societal villains now. This Western media has found a counterpart in Cambridge Analytica, a whole new rival. Cambridge Analytica is a large gleaming mirror in front of Western media, excelling them in their antiquated techniques and branding. Prejudices, ignorance, falsehoods, and colonialism mindset. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's goal, in revoking special status for Muslim-majority Jammu and Kashmir, was to improve governance and curb Pakistan-sponsored jihadist extremism. Western media jumped on the move as proof that India was becoming a religiously intolerant Hindu nation, in which Muslims were being persecuted. The editor of the Washington Post's Global Opinions section termed Modi's action in Kashmir as the darkest moment, adding that India is becoming less democratic and stable, one authoritarian step at a time. The fact that Modi, whose ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, is portrayed by this liberal mainstream American establishment newspaper as a fanatical Hindu nationalist group, won 9% of the votes cast by India's Muslim voters in the 2014 general election, and kept almost the same level of support from them in the 2019 election, seems to have gone unnoticed. International relations specialists from other countries were taken aback when India chose to abstain from voting on the UN resolution denouncing aggression against Ukraine. British newscaster Alistair Stewart saw this as an opportunity to mock India for prioritizing its own interests above those of the West. Alistair Stewart said, "Pretty predictable, but India and Pakistan should hang their heads in shame and, henceforth, receive not a penny piece in aid from the UK." It seems that the ignorant newscaster is uninformed of the background of India's continuing non-alignment in international politics. He used the chance to reveal his colonial mentality by advising India to be ashamed of its sovereign actions. The West humiliated India for 2 centuries when it arrived in India in the middle of the 18th century in its predatory form. He probably has no idea how much money the British stole from India. A research on economics attempted to calculate how much the British took out of India and came up with a figure of $45 trillion in today's worth. The worldwide media has repeatedly manufactured news that is wholly prejudicial and biased in order to profit from the market while simultaneously advancing its agendas. Let me give you a few examples that demonstrate the hypocrisy of the Western media, which has turned to manufacturing news stories and other material to increase reader or viewer engagement. The New York Times ran an editorial piece that repeated the claim that the BJP administration is attempting to portray a multi-faith country of over 1.3 billion as a Hindu nation by using the sari as a symbol of Hindu identity. According to an article in the New York Times headlined, "In India, fashion has become a nationalist cause." Asghar Qadri, editor of New York Times, writes that the BJP, which came to power in 2014, encouraged the Indian design industry to aggressively promote traditional dress and disregard Western influences. In reality, the sari is not a Hindu outfit, rather, it is the world's oldest and maybe the only unstitched garment from the past. Even Bangladesh's Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, wore a sari. The first record of saris in India was discovered during the Indus Valley Civilization, when historians discovered evidence of women wearing saris. Saris are popular among Indians because they are both beautiful and versatile clothing. So here, he demonstrates his ignorance and lack of knowledge and understanding of India. In 2014, India became the first country to reach Mars in the Mangalyaan mission's maiden attempt. It was a defining moment in India's space research and Indian space technology. The New York Times published a cartoon widely seen as racist, depicting an impoverished Indian banging on the doors of an exclusive space club with a cow in tow. Online outrage prompts the New York Times to apologize for the racist cartoon it published. Another incident, in which a driver plowed a pickup truck down a crowded bike path along the Hudson River in Manhattan, killing 8 people and injuring 11, before being shot by a police officer. The New York Times dubbed the incident the deadliest terror attack. But the attack on the CRPF convoy in Pulwama, which killed 40 security personnel, was dubbed an explosion. Time magazine dubbed Prime Minister Narendra Modi India's divider-in-chief, blaming him for an environment of toxic religious nationalism. They just ignored the fact that, in the 2019 general election, millions of people from all religious, caste, and linguistic backgrounds overwhelmingly chose Modi for a second term. Bloomberg, which quoted GDP estimates from the International Monetary Fund, India has surpassed the United Kingdom to become the world's 5th biggest economy. Bloomberg refers to India as a former British colony. Bloomberg seem to be suffering from a colonial hangover, as seen by the newest tweet. Is it that difficult to write India, or do they have to include India as a former colony to demonstrate how superior they were? Or they just forgot the truth and reality that 200 years of British rule degraded India from one of the world's richest to one of the poorest. And their claims of providing development and political unification were false and nonsense. They just ignored the fact that the British did nothing for India or Indians. As one of my viewers pointed out, correctly, the actual strength of the British Empire was India. Where did they get such enormous amounts of money and the finest manpower to create their economy and fight their wars? On the day India achieved its independence, the British Empire was reduced to consisting of just England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. The colonialism mindset is profoundly ingrained in Western media, and it continues to be prevalent even in modern times. This occurred because the colonists were convinced without a shadow of a doubt that their way was superior. And in many cases they thought that it was their God-given responsibility to impose it on the indigenous people of other countries. However, one aspect of this mentality that receives less attention is the fact that this mindset persists even today. The history of British colonization of India runs parallel to the history of Western media coverage of India. And now, the fact is that India is the world's 5th largest economy, overtaking the United Kingdom. IMF forecasts show India surpassing the UK in dollar terms this year, putting the Asian powerhouse behind just the US, China, Japan and Germany. A decade ago, India ranked 11th among the largest economies, while the UK was 5th. How will the global economic order change by 2050? Some analysts believe that the globe will see a shift in global economic dominance away from established advanced economies, particularly those in Europe, and toward rising economies in Asia and elsewhere. Major emerging economies countries, China, India, Brazil, Turkey, Russia, Mexico, and Indonesia, together known as the E7, might account for over half of global GDP by 2050, while the G7 accounts for just over 20%. It is predicted that the economies of the E7 countries would expand at an average annual pace of nearly 3.5% during the next 34 years, whereas the economies of the advanced G7 countries will grow at an average annual rate of only 1.6%.